Well, hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. We are now sitting down here, still here at Christ the Savior, and I'm here with Father John, and we're just going to talk a little more about Orthodoxy, what it's like, life in the Orthodox Church. But once again, thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. And so, to start off with, I think, just touched on it briefly at the beginning of the tour, but this is an OCA Orthodox Church.
Right.
What does that mean, and how does that play out?
Okay. Well, the Orthodox Church in America, the OCA, is our mother church is from Russia.
Okay.
So when the Russian mission came over to America through Alaska, made its way down through California, we are a part of that original mission. We were under the Moscow Patriarch until 1970. There's a group known as the Metropolia. In 1970, we were given autocephaly, so we are the only autocephalous Orthodox Church in the United States.
Oh, and could you break that down, autocephalous?
So what that means is we have our own Synod of Bishops. Our Synod of Bishop makes the decisions for the church in this country. We don't have to go back to an ancient patriarchate and for bishops or any decisions. Any disputes that need to be decided, they're all decided within the Holy Synod of Bishops in this country.
Okay, interesting. And now, from my limited understanding, obviously, and like I've mentioned, I have a lot of Catholic subscribers. Obviously, for them, they also have bishops and there's councils, but they have a pope at the top. For you, like as in your role here as priest, what is the, if you will, what does the org chart look like up from you?
So for each parish priest, we serve at the leisure of our bishop. So they place us here, and we get to serve here as long as they want us to. Okay. And that's because the great number of churches and parishes that are in a diocese, a bishop can't be at every one every Sunday. And so my direct link is to my bishop, which is Archbishop Paul of Chicago in the Midwest. Okay. And then there is, each local diocese has its hierarch, its bishop, and then they form a holy synod, and then we have what is known as a metropolitan in the OCA. Okay. That would be Metropolitan Tikhon. He's the Archbishop of Washington and all of North America. That is a position that is a representation position. It's an administrative position, but he's also the overseer of all the OCA. Okay. So not that he would ever intervene with any one diocese. Okay. He's a bishop in his own diocese. But it's an administrative position that is that he's the one that they all, he does all of our PR, so to speak, and does all the visits and other patriarchates and churches around the world.
Okay, and so and this might be like a crude difference to not the most like academic explanation of it, but the difference being, so for the Metropolitan, he is a bishop. Like I think they would say the Pope is the Bishop of Rome, but for them they would put the Pope over the bishops, whereas the Metropolitan would be equal with the bishops.
He's equal with the bishops.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a position that that by consensus he was elected to. Okay. It's an elected position within the OCA by his brother bishops, who appointed him to serve in that capacity.
All right, interesting. And so another interesting difference that I've noticed right off the bat is that when we came in the tour at the beginning, you talked about the patron saints of your wife and kids. So you are a priest, and you have a wife and kids. That is different than most of my Roman Catholic friends who might be priests, or different than all of them, just about. So is that normal? Are most Orthodox priests married, or?
Yeah, I think it's normal that Orthodox priests are married. Every now and then you'll come across one who's not for various reasons, but celibacy is a calling, not something that is forced upon clergy within the Orthodox Church throughout the whole world. Okay. So I'm married. I've got 5 children. Wow. most clergy are married. Every now and then you'll see a monastic that serves a parish.
Okay.
And every now and then you'll find a celibate clergyman for various reasons. I have a friend who, I have a couple of close friends who are celibate priests. Now one of them, his wife died, and the other one, he just chose to be celibate because he went to seminary later in life. And one of the things that before you have to be married before you are ordained. So
Okay.
you're married first and then ordained. He was in his, I think at that time, early 30s, and the pickings get a little slim as you get older.
Sure.
To find someone who hasn't been married and doesn't have any children, and to be married, and someone who wants to marry a priest at that age, and so I just felt it was his calling, but it wasn't anything that was forced on him. It was a choice that he made to the way he wanted to live. So
awesome, very very neat. I think those are some perhaps easy surface level differences. I'd love to get into a bit of just what it's like being a priest here in the city. I imagine that brings its own interesting joys and challenges, but like you mentioned, we are not only in downtown Chicago, you're right across from Moody Bible Institute, which, if people aren't familiar, is the school I go to, but is also one of the bigger or more well-known Bible institutes out there.
Right.
What is that like, both being in the city, across from Moody? How does that all play into life as a priest here?
It's been an interesting ride. I think it takes a unique calling to be a city priest. I don't think I'm unique, but I think it's definitely a unique calling that you have to want to be fully immersed in. And really that's what it is. It's full immersion. I mean, you know what it's like. You walk down the streets here and you're immersed with everything.
Oh, yeah.
And, when you walk around dressed like this, it's a little, you stand out a little more. But I really feel this is where God has placed me, wanted me to be. When I first came here, there was literally a handful of people here.
Really?
I came here, I was bivocational. They couldn't afford to pay me full time, so I worked doing something else as well. As the parish began to grow, I was able to make this just to be full time and not do any other side jobs. And it's been interesting for my family. I mean, raising 5 children in downtown Chicago has been a challenge, but there's been a lot of blessings with that as well. They have a unique perspective on life that a lot of people don't have, living in a downtown area, seeing people on the street that are different from them, and people who are suffering and homeless, and being able to not be afraid of people who are different from them. Yeah. And there's been some interesting things that have happened here. I've had some close calls with people with obviously mentally disturbed, and neighbors who don't like the bells ringing at 2 a.m. on Pascha night. And I was attacked once.
Really?
On a Pascha evening, we read the gospel at midnight out on the front porch, and the bells were ringing, and a guy came who must have woke him up from down the street, and he came running down the street at me with wearing just some jeans, no shoes, socks, no shirt, started screaming, tried to tackle me on the porch.
Wow.
One of the guys luckily grabbed him, and the police came shortly afterwards, but he didn't want to be woke up that night.
Wow.
So it's been interesting, but it is a unique calling. I'm grateful to have been here for so long. And one of the things we do here, what I try and do is, whenever the weather permits, is the front doors are open. When there's a service going on, the front doors are open, and the candles you'll see lit in the candle stands there, and people will come by and they look in, and if they hear something coming from inside, they're singing. That's that whole idea of just the prayer spilling out onto the street.
Yeah.
During the Chicago Marathon, it runs right by the church here. So that Sunday, there's things you just have to deal with when you're a priest at this parish in downtown. The marathon, we used to have to begin later, the service that day, but now they changed the time of the marathon, so that isn't a big deal. But I would come in early. I do the proscomidi service. I'm fully vested in my vestments. I go stand out there on the front porch And it's amazing just to see how many people will run by and wave or say, "Father, bless me," or
Wow.
I had no clue there was an Orthodox church here, or I have one lady that's every year has come by and runs up, she goes, "Can I use your bathroom?" Same woman every year.
Wow.
I say, "You know where it's at, go ahead." So, interesting things that you wouldn't get in a suburban church for sure.
Yeah.
But it's you have a ministry of just being present.
Yeah.
Riding the bus and being dressed like this, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. Sometimes you get on the bus and there's a girl that's, will hike her shirt back up a little bit, or the guys that are in the back will stop swearing, and then but then there's other times people will, that behavior gets kind of exaggerated, just to see if they can push your buttons, I think. So it's interesting. I've enjoyed it.
That's really interesting. I love the way you talk about it, of allowing the church to spill out into the city as well. It reminds me, actually, you know him, a Moody student that comes here every week, and I don't know if it was this church or if it was at the Greek Orthodox Church up the street, but he had no plans of ever really looking into Orthodoxy, and one day he heard the chanting from on the street while he was walking up to Moody Church.
Okay.
And went in, and as you know, he's been coming to Orthodox churches just about every week since then. But it has to be an interesting place where the ancient meets the modern, in a sense, in that.
And where the sacramental meets the secular.
Yeah.
We do processions, and for various feast days, and we're carrying, the cross and icons, and people are singing, and we're walking, down Salle, and people are, they're bewildered. What is going on here?
Right.
And we walk around the church, and we can't, usually when you do a procession in liturgical tradition, the Orthodox Church, you go around the church. We can't do that. We have condos pushed right up against us, and so we have to walk down the street, and we walk up the alley, and the people behind us sometimes they're looking out their windows watching us, and one of the other things we have to do is we have to have somebody at the end of the alley make sure a car doesn't whip through there and run us all over when we're, so there's unique things,
challenges.
But really, you have that meeting of the secular and the sacramental when you open those doors and when we go out into the streets, and it's a visible presence of Christ and the kingdom of heaven, really, in the middle of this urban jungle, for lack of a better way of looking at it, but it really is at times.
That's really interesting, and it's interesting to think about as someone who grew up in non-denominational churches where, we bent over backwards to make the church look like the outside. That there wouldn't be that hard contrast. When you'd walk into the church I grew up in, you'd get your latte or whatever, and you'd have your big screens, and I remember sitting in meetings. I worked at this church for a time of thinking about our favorite coffee shops that we go to, and how can we adjust, how can we make it as welcoming in that way as possible. But obviously that's not the Orthodox ethos. When you walk into this church, you feel like you're in a completely different space in a way. It's like Chicago's out there, and you're in Chicago, but you're kind of in a different world. What is kind of the Orthodox perspective on that? Why is there this emphasis on retaining the ancient church in this way?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. It's the church is timeless. Mm-hmm. It's unchanging. It's the body of Christ. Christ is eternal, and so you have that within the Orthodox Church. You have this bit of eternity right here, and so I think practically as we play this out, just look at the way people are today. People are thirsting.
Yeah.
They're thirsting. They're hungry. They don't, if they want a coffee, they'll go to a coffee shop, right? Or I have some friends who are Protestants, and they get tired of the way things are going, so they switch up the service, or they switch up the way the music they're playing, or it's always this thing of trying to keep up with the times and make it relevant, and to me, and I don't mean this it just seems kind of it kind of is it's just a really watering down of what we are and who we are called to be as Christians. We're called to partake of the body and blood of Christ and become like him. We're called to become like God. And when you step into an Orthodox church, there is this feeling, this presence of holiness. You know, and it's not much different from when you meet a holy person. You know, I've had a couple opportunities in my life to meet people that were really holy. I mean, vessels of grace. Wow. And you knew it from the minute you were in their presence. It wasn't because there was some sort of show they put on. It wasn't because they had a big long beard. It wasn't because of anything other than the fact that they radiated love. They radiated the Spirit of God. Yeah. And I think that's what people want.
Absolutely.
I can get a latte. You know, I make my own lattes. I don't want to go spend $5 for one at Starbucks or whatever.
Yeah, and there's no shortage of coffee shops.
You know, so we retain what is you know, we retain this because, you know, it's unchanging. It doesn't change with the times. It's not something that can be it's not disposable. You know, it's not something that's recyclable. It's eternal and everlasting. And so there's a really, I think it's just a really cool way to talk about the ethos of the Orthodox Church or an understanding. It's really cool to walk into a church like this and, you know that 1,000 years ago, same thing. Yeah. Same hymns being sung, same way, same prayers, the prayer book, the language of the church. You know, there's a power that comes with that, with thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of people saying these same prayers and worshiping in the same way and ultimately becoming, God willing, you know, sanctified. Yeah. You know, and that's really all the things that we do. You know, the prayers, the fasting, the ascetic labors, the good works, you know, everything is done in order to become more like Christ. And we can't do that alone. It's important that we do that in communion, obviously. And so here is a really unique place in Chicago to do that. Yeah. You know, I really wish there was a way that to, you know, open the doors for the times that we're in services, but, you know, weather's not really too pleasing here for a whole lot of the time. So we do little things, you know, get a speaker outside where people can hear just faintly what's going on inside. You know, or I've got some other ideas of things that I'd like to do. There have been times where they have Orthodox coffee shops. Really? I'd love to put one. I've always wanted to put one next door, just to be another presence in the city. Just where you could go and get your coffee and hang out and have a place to read and hear some Orthodox chant in the background. Nothing that's, you know, in your face or anything. Wow. But, just to, you know, those big doors to come in are scary for a lot of people, I think. Yeah, they're beautiful, but they're intimidating. Yeah, they are intimidating. That's why I want them open. Yeah. And that's when you come by and you see the candles, you see the icons of Christ, and there's something that draws some people in. Wow. You know, I have to say, that's just so refreshing to me to hear, because something I hear people, I don't want to call it an accusation, but I guess that's a fair word to use about the Orthodox Church, is that while it's beautiful if you get into it, that it can sometimes feel a bit exclusive, that it's, you know, so detached from the world in some good ways, but that it's difficult to break into, or it feels like, you know, you have to be this ethnicity to get in, or you have to have this background, and if not, it's, you know, not for you. I think it was actually maybe an Orthodox Metropolitan that said Orthodoxy was the best kept secret in America, which I imagine isn't a goal. You know, you don't want this to be a secret. And I love that you're thinking in those ways. And is that something you see, is that a tide turning in the Orthodox? Do you see that you have that feeling in spite of being Orthodox, or in fact because you're Orthodox that you want to reach out? Well, I think you're right. I mean, it's changing. Times are changing, and there's less of an ethnic divide, I think, you know, the way that the Orthodox Church came over to the United States, to North America for that matter. You know, it was ethnic, you know, communities. Yeah. And slowly, you know, people married into the faith, or people learned about the faith. But now, I mean, you come here and we've had every ethnicity here. I mean, we have Asians, Mexicans, blacks, you know, it's just a good melting pot of what America is. I think maybe there's some parishes that you go on to that may be a specific ethnicity, and that's, who they cater to. And you do get that a lot here, and I think in Chicago more than you may somewhere else, because there are such heavily concentrated ethnic communities here.
Okay.
Chicago is the second heaviest populated Greek city in the world.
Really?
Athens is number 1, Chicago is number 2.
I never would have known that.
So there's lots of Greek Orthodox churches here, but there's lots of Greek Orthodox, and there's so many priests to take care of all those people.
Right.
And so they cater to maybe some parishes more than others. Same with the Serbs. Belgrade is the number 1 populated Serbian city, and Chicago is number 2.
What do you know?
So you may get that more here than you would other places, but I really think, it was a matter of time, and we're probably about 100 years behind the Catholics in that regard. I think maybe 100 years ago, if you were in Chicago and you had an Irish Catholic church next door to you and you were a German household, you would go 3 blocks away to the German Catholic church.
Sure.
You don't have that anymore here, from at least what I can tell.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a matter of time before it becomes the same way for the Orthodox Church.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up, and I know so many of my subscribers will be asking, as I've mentioned, so many of them are Catholic, which is very interesting as a Protestant, but grateful for the community that God's given me on that channel. But whenever I talk about Orthodoxy, they do mention that, and I think this is kind of a newer thing in Catholicism, that there's been several Eastern churches that are now in union with Rome. And so they say, like, hey, I heard you enjoyed going to that divine liturgy. We've got all that too in our Eastern Catholic churches. As an Orthodox priest, what do you see when you look at that? Because I noticed, and I mentioned it in that video, that you guys, you don't claim to be just like the Eastern side of Catholicism. It's
Right.
on the pamphlet that you guys put out. And so, not to put you on the spot, but what does that look like as an Eastern Catholic priest? As an Eastern Orthodox priest? Because I imagine if you walked into one of their churches, it would look similar in some ways to this.
Well, yeah, I think, you can, put icons and say you like icons and you want to have dress in black and have, the hymnography be a certain way. But, you still have the doctrine, which we don't adhere to, that, we say is heretical.
Yeah.
And so we'd say they are, not part of the Orthodox Church, part of the Catholicism, and it'd be, if someone went from the Orthodox Christian Church to Catholicism, we would consider them an apostate.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I know I imagine those aren't things you say lightly, but I appreciate you just being forthright about the Orthodox position on it.
It's just what it is.
Yeah.
It's, speak the truth in love. It's not a judgment. It's not casting stones on anybody. It's what the ecumenical councils have held and what we adhere to as Orthodox Christians. So, I remember when there was the last Pope's funeral, they had a group of Byzantine Catholics, or Eastern, I'm not sure what they call them for sure now, but I thought it was kind of cool seeing them.
Yeah.
Like, hey, they look like us. But
Sure. Yeah,
but we don't adhere to this whole thing about the Pope being the vicar of Christ.
Sure. And I think at the end of the day, that's probably the biggest dividing point there, because from my understanding I've talked to a few Catholics who have been kind of upset with the Novus Ordo and then have not wanted to go to the Latin Mass, but now they go to a Byzantine Catholic church because they appreciate the liturgy. And I believe they don't recite the Filioque in their creeds, at least at that church at the time.
Well, maybe they're on the way back.
Yeah, who knows? But it's interesting. And so there's, on one hand, the Catholics who have picked up some Orthodox things, but there is at least some diversity within the Orthodox Church in that. Well, and I guess I'd be curious to hear this. So I've been to this Orthodox church, only one I've ever, I met with a Catholic or Orthodox priest once, but never went to a service there. So this was my first. It was great. Thank you.
You're welcome. It was nice having you. It was good to see you. I didn't get to sit down and talk with you afterwards because we have the COVID restrictions. I can only have 4 at a table at that time, so it was already taken. But
yeah, no, it was great. I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate you doing this now. my understanding, just a couple blocks up the street, there's a Greek Orthodox church. If I went in there, I mean, the building might look different, but how different would a service be? And could someone from your church go over there and back and forth, or is there a bit of a separation in any way?
No, I mean, all the Orthodox churches are in communion with one another. So there's been times where we've done things with the church up the street. One of my altar servers now, a younger man who attends here, he's the parish secretary up there.
Oh, really?
So he comes to church here and he works up there. We did a procession with them on Holy Friday with the church up the street a couple years back. So in communion with all the churches, whatever ethnic background they may be. There's small differences, I think. Maybe the church up the street, they use a bit of Greek up there, I believe. So
I would notice the difference.
Yeah, you would notice the difference in that. Maybe the vestments might be a little different. So I wear high backs sometimes. Sometimes I wear Serbian style as well, the low backs. But the hymnography would be a little different. We use a different tonal system for our chant than they do in Byzantine chant. So the hymnography would be a little different. Then we would have more of a four-part choir where they would have maybe just have one person chanting the service. So little differences that play out. Maybe different things slightly liturgically, but nothing major. Nothing major.
You would feel at home, though.
Oh yeah, of course. And if it was all in Greek, and I know very little Greek, but whether I went up the street there, I went to Mount Athos, I've been there several times, in Russia, you walk into the liturgy and you know where you're at.
Wow, there's a beauty to that.
Yeah, you know where you're at, the service is going to be the same, no one's going to throw a curveball at you. And if you do, you're probably not in a canonical church. They're doing something strange. And so that's the universality of it all, is that it's really like going home wherever you go. Being home. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I want to make sure to respect your time. I'm sure there's been so much that people have gotten out of this, and thank you so much for doing this. I know I've greatly enjoyed it. I want to just close with just a couple things. One, I'd love to just hear, how did you end up as an Orthodox priest?
Well, I'll take you back to the beginning. When I was a young boy, I grew up in Michigan. I wasn't baptized as a child. My dad's side of the family is Serbian. My mom's side of the family was of a Protestant denomination. And my mom didn't want me to be baptized until I was old enough to decide for myself, kind of Protestant type thing. And so when I was young, I would go to the Orthodox Church with my Serbian grandmother one week, and the next week I would go to another church with my Protestant grandfather on the other side. And I went back and forth, and it was kind of Christian schizophrenia for a while.
I bet.
And I think when I was about 7, I stopped going to the Protestant church with my grandfather. I really liked and felt at home in the Orthodox Church. And the priest there was just this enormous man. His name was Father Raphael Bernacchi of blessed memory. He was just the kindest, loving man you'd ever meet. And he was 6'8", just a monster of a man. He might have been that big. Maybe he was. I mean, he was probably that big. He was just. And I remember him going around the church, sensing and just in his Phalonian, going behind him, and he seemed like a superhero.
Wow.
And I thought, I want to be a priest when I grow up. Well. Time went on, I got older, I got into high school and started liking girls and sports and doing other things, and figured priests can't have any fun, and I kind of threw that one out the door. I was baptized when I was 11. Went to church frequently, was an altar server. Never left the church, never became a non-believer, never walked away from Christ, always very believing and faithful, and read the scriptures and prayed every now and then, but kind of teenage years, I didn't have any direction. My parents weren't churchgoers. I had an aunt and a grandmother who would take me, when I was younger, on my dad's side, and thank God through them that kind of instilled something within me that lasted and got me through those teenage years and my early 20s. My early 20s, I was in a place where I didn't really like the way my life was. I wasn't happy. I didn't feel fulfilled. Something was missing. I was having a lot of problems. And I went back to that church. And in the meantime, I had gotten married. My wife and I had gotten married in the church because I knew I needed to be married in the Orthodox Church. That was a Freudian slip. I said buried. So we were married in the church, but this priest came there, and he was there when I needed him. I rolled up on my motorcycle one day. I was coming from a construction site. I was working construction. Okay. And I went in there and talked with him, and he didn't turn me away. Mm-hmm. He made time for me, even though I'm sure I showed up there probably somewhere before 4 p.m., and I got to be thinking now he was probably thinking about wanting to go home at that point. And this guy rolls up on a Harley Davidson with long hair and asking to speak with him. And he I can't remember how long we talked for, but it was a long time. And I started going back, and he just had this, he was just always open to me. Anytime I had a question, anytime I wanted to talk, there was never, he never turned away. Wow. And he made me remember things in my life that I had forgotten about. And I remember one time I went to confession for him. This is the short version of the story, sorry.
No, I love this.
But I went to confession one time to him, and he said, "You ever think about being a priest?" And I laughed, and I said, "You just heard my confession. What do you mean? Have I ever thought about being a priest?" And he started just kind of nurturing me, and one day I ran into him at church afterwards or something, and he handed me an envelope, and I think there was something like $200 in it. And he said, "St. Tikhon Seminary is having a vocations encounter. I want you to go." Yeah. And handed me this envelope with some money, and I was like, "I don't need money." He's like, "I want you to go. Here, take this." I was kind of obliged to go, right? So drove to Pennsylvania that was in 2000, early 2000. I'd been going to church for a couple years, coming back by then, started serving the altar again, and came back from this weekend there and went to my wife and just said, I think you need to come and check this out. Wow. And we went back with our two children on Memorial Day weekend. It was the weekend that they were glorifying St. Raphael of Brooklyn as a saint. The first bishop consecrated in the United States. He was he's up on our iconostas, 1, 2, 3, 4 over from Christ on the right-hand side there. There were thousands of people there for this canonization of this saint, and my wife was just blown away as I was, and we went home and that weekend and sold our house in like 2 weeks, and everything just kind of happened, and ended up in seminary, and here I am now. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and one day a bishop knocked on my door. I lived about a mile from the seminary, and he said, "Hey, I want to talk to you." And I was like, "Okay, come on in."
Wow.
And here I am. That's the kind of the short version, kind of long, but so.
Wow, that's wonderful. And I mean, praise God for that priest just being willing to take that time. That's fantastic.
I mean, he really changed my life. I mean, if it wasn't for him, I don't know what my life would have taken. Wow. And becoming a priest, I always have it in my mind, if I can do for one person what he did for me, then this will all be worth it. Wow. It'll all be worth it.
And I don't think I can top that, so I think we'll end on that note. But thank you so much for being here. And if anyone wants to learn more about Christ the Savior, I'll put a link in the description. That'd be great. And you guys also, you broadcast on Ancient Faith Radio as well?
Ancient Faith Radio every Sunday at 9:30 a.m. We do an audio stream of the service. Yeah, we've been doing that for 5 or 6 years now, I think. So we're grateful to be able to have that ministry.
Awesome. Well, I'll put links to that, and thank you so much for doing this. This was a pleasure.
Thank you.